One day my daughter came home from school and announced that the teachers had told her that she was in first grade now and it was time to stop being extracted. Well, I can remember as a kid the teachers always telling me to stop daydreaming. And I always thought, well, why don't you guys stop being so boring? And I'm still not convinced that education has to be boring. But as an adult, I've become dissatisfied with how much of the time I spend feeling distracted. I'd like to be more present in my own life. So a year ago, I decided that I'd learn meditation. I've taken the first 5 courses in the way of Shambhala training, and I thought it would be a good time to stop and look back and see whether I could identify any practical differences that meditation has made in my life. And I think I've discovered 7 things that have changed and 1 that hasn't. When I tell people that I've started to practice meditation, the first question I often get is, have you experienced nirvana? No. But if any of you run across nirvana, please do say hello for me. Permission to be gentle. On the first day, the meditation instructor urged us to be gentle with ourselves when we approached meditation. Okay, I thought to myself, this isn't going to be a project. No timelines, no goals. I'm just going to let learning emerge from experience. What learning? During the first weekend course, I felt this pungent anxiety about following my breath. I kept thinking, if I follow my breath too intensely, I'm going to forget to breathe. And if I forget to breathe, I'm going to die. Well, I didn't forget to breathe. I didn't die. Breathing in, breathing out. Yeah, I can do this. Relax. One of the early meditation instructions is not too tight, not too loose. There were several occasions over the first year where I found myself getting really cranked up because I wasn't able to do what it was they assigned. And often the meditation instructor would just say to the class, this is the sort of thing you almost have to relax into. One of my favorite examples of this is my confusion with sight. They would give instructions like, lower your gaze to a 45-degree angle and focus about 5 feet in front of you with a soft gaze. Well, I can do the math. I can lower my gaze to 45 degrees, and I can figure out what 5 feet away from me is. But whatever I'd wind up putting my sight onto, I'd wind up concentrating on way too much. Man, isn't that an interesting fabric that person has with their shirt? Ooh, I can make the geometric pattern in that banner go back and forth. That's a really good geometric pattern, which is all very entertaining, but isn't meditation. So I asked one of my instructors once, what is soft gaze? And she said, well, I relax my eyeballs into my head. I can't tell you better than that. I don't know whether it'll work for you or not. Relax. It keeps coming up. I've become more aware over the past year of the difference between having a feeling and being aware of having a feeling. Feeling anxious is different from being aware of being anxious. There have been a number of occasions over the past year when I became aware that I was feeling anxious, aware of the physical sensations of a tightness, of a jitteriness in my stomach, and I just stayed with that physical sensation. And it always diminished fairly quickly. Be aware of the beast, but don't feed the beast. You know, for as long as I can remember, I've woken up each morning with a vague sense of dread. Over the past year, I've seen a pronounced reduction in that sense of dread, both in frequency and intensity. Now, I still get a sense of dread, particularly on stressful days, but I don't dwell on it as long. I've experienced an increase in attention, particularly as evidenced by my ability to read without having to reread the beginning of a paragraph because my mind wandered off in the middle of the paragraph. Now, this is a subtle difference. I still have a lot of difficulty reading. I think that I've gotten a glimpse of what compassion through more accurate perception might be like. This also might get filed under staying in the present moment instead of jumping into the fear of what I think the present moment is going to be like. There was a new employee at a site that I supervise who was talking about leaving her position. Now, filling positions at my workplace is an arduous, difficult process. So my first temptation was immediately to try and talk her out of leaving the position because of all the work that would cause me. I was able to stop myself from doing that, and instead I asked her what it was that she was concerned about. And she indicated a number of problems with the current work site that were valid and real and unlikely to change. But she also indicated a lack of confidence in her own clinical skills, and that bothered me because she seemed to me to be a rather promising clinician. So I asked her if we could talk about this another day as she continued to think about it. And I went back and I reviewed the case notes of 3 youth that she had worked with, and a very consistent pattern emerged. The documentation showed how she did a good job of identifying problems that the youth was having currently with problems that the youth had had in the community. She also did a good job of showing what strengths the youth had and how those strengths could be folded into dealing with situations and coming up with some different outcomes. I was able to redact the identifying information from this documentation and print out PDFs to give her. And we went over the cases, and she agreed that she had shown the clinical strengths that I thought that I had been seeing. So I gave her something that she could take along with her, whether she decided to stay in the current position or leave for another position. Now that's a very different sort of conversation than I would have had before I started meditating.